Part 2, a reading from A Testimony of Christian Faith. Years later, I was to live and work for a period of time in the city of Las Vegas, Nevada. During my time in Las Vegas, I came to realize that I had never before viewed so many lost and hopeless appearing souls in all my travels. The person, location, or thing where a person chooses to place their hope expresses to me who they are and where they are going. Many had placed their hope in gambling. While in Las Vegas, I was a member of the most attended Presbyterian church in the city. Under the church's umbrella, I was to create and lead Las Vegas Christian Singles for the purpose to attract Christian singles into fellowship and to have a Christian outreach. I would like to say my efforts were successful, although I do believe being faithful overrides being successful. Only God knows the eventual outcome when each of us places our faith before what we can actually see with our limited vision. The culture in Las Vegas, even in the Christian community, was far different from other areas of the country. In all my travels, especially while I was living in Las Vegas, God was surely watching over me. While there in Las Vegas, I had felt closer to God than anywhere I had ever been in my entire life. Eventually, I returned to Denver. In Denver, during the early 1980s, a divorced pastor in Denver founded a ministry named Rocky Mountain Christian Singles. I wanted to be supportive of Pastor Charles and his ministry, and thereafter for several years I was to co-lead and help organize a Wednesday evening Bible study for his ministry. It is claimed that losing a loved one because of divorce is worse than losing a loved one because of a death. With death, there is grief, and eventually there comes a time for healing. Because the loved one is no longer in your life, the grief hurts, but thankfully does go away. With a divorce, there is the grief after the loss of a loved one. But because of the continuation of the mutual love of a child, there are times when this healing becomes extremely difficult. In the future, there are moments you are required to remain in the presence of the one that supposedly had been removed from your life, the partner you once had loved. At Rocky Mountain Christian Singles, I would listen while a person would talk about their divorce as if it had only occurred the previous month. Afterwards, you would find out their divorce had occurred over 10 years prior. Pastor Charles would hold Sunday morning church services in well-known saloons and dance halls in and around the city of Denver. The night before a Sunday morning service, these saloons and dance halls would be jam-packed with partygoers and the people of the night. A covering would be placed over the liquors as Pastor Charles would stand on the stage. The congregation would then sit at the bar or around the tables across the dance floor. A lot of those on a Sunday morning definitely needed to hear the message of what Pastor Charles had to say. They probably had sat at the same table the night before under totally different circumstances. During the 1980s and the 1990s, these saloons and dance halls were closed on Sundays. Therefore, they were accessible for Pastor Charles' ministry. At Rocky Mountain Christian Singles, I saw hundreds come and go. Many were there only for the social aspects in order to interact and socialize, but they all heard the gospel, and many were saved. During those years, while being a volunteer and a supporter of Rocky Mountain Christian Singles, I witnessed an example of this truth of like-mindedness, as Pastor Charles also had experienced divorce. Everyone knew that he was divorced. Therefore, they identified with him as being like-minded with them concerning their own divorce. They were willing to hear what he had to say, including the sharing of the gospel of Jesus Christ. It was also true that many of those who attended Rocky Mountain Christian Singles had never been married, and many were widowed. But the vast majority had experienced divorce, and they truly identified themselves with Pastor Charles and his ministry. Rocky Mountain Christian Singles, under Pastor Charles' leadership, was to become the highest attended Christian singles ministry in Denver, and none since has matched it to my knowledge. Christian churches throughout the entire nation struggle to maintain a congregational interest in their adult singles programs unless their programs is directed toward those under the age of 30. Years later, after my participation with Rocky Mountain Christian Singles, I was led to being the founder of Singles in Fellowship, which was later renamed Christian Testimony Outreach. Since then, I have been highlighted 3 times on Denver Christian television. On my third and my last interview, I discussed my ministry, Christian Testimony Outreach. To begin with, I had a compassion for those who had experienced a divorce or a widowship, and these broken people had a place in my heart to reach out to. Generally, widowship is always a certainty. In addition, I would never encourage or sanction a divorce, as I believe marriage is a holy covenant between God, a man, and a woman. Just maybe God has given me an insight about divorce, about God's forgiveness, and about God's grace for the restoration of a life. Other pastors who might be blessed by having an anointed marriage might not be able to communicate and share this comparable witness of forgiveness and grace to others. Perhaps God has provided me words to say that I might share with others. I have visited many churches and have found the subject about divorce never being mentioned. Statistically, the divorce rate in America is 50%. Sadly, within the American church, the divorce rate is the same. Many of our church congregation members are now married for the 2nd or 3rd time. I think the most destructive force that is tearing down our America today is the number of divorces in our homes. It destroys lives and scars our children for life. It goes against God's plan. The answer with many in today's generation is to live together and to ignore God's covenant between a man and a woman. This definitely is not the answer. The answer for everyone is held in the truth of God's words. We suffer because of lacking the knowledge of God's truths and then believing and obeying what we know to be absolute truth. In the mid-1990s, when the internet became accessible, I created my own website on the internet providing instructions on how to form a testimony outreach in a person's own church or community. By instructions over the internet, a church or any Christ-centered individual could sponsor an outreach for those whom are like-minded and sharing Christian testimonies anywhere in the world. The purpose for a Christian testimony outreach was to surround an individual with a grouping of like-minded Christian believers. The outcome of a meeting should be governed by the trust in the Holy Spirit's presence. As the Holy Spirit leads, it provides a setting to share a personal Christian testimony and the gospel of Jesus Christ, while at the same time it is to be a place for fellowship, prayer, and uplifting for Christians and their guests. Christian testimony outreach, after being my own ministry site to share these instructions for over 14 years, was discontinued in March 2012. I pray that many seeds were planted. I did replace it with a Facebook group page under the same name as on my deleted site, Christian Testimony Outreach. Currently, any person may freely read or post a Christian testimony on Facebook under this group Facebook page. There are now over 1,150 members that freely post or read other people's testimonies, as these testimonies are available to anyone desiring to share and be strengthened in their own faith by this sharing with others. Also, I created an individual social site on Facebook using only the name Christian Testimony. It would provide an interactive site that would require my personal befriending and accepting others. This new interactive social Facebook friend site changed over the years as Christians, rather than sharing their testimonies, would ask for me to pray for them or to pray for a loved one. I began to author and post prayers. Eventually, that is all I was doing, was authoring and sharing exampled Christian prayers for others. After 5 years of using the name of Christian Testimony or Christian Prayers, Facebook required me to place my real name on the site, or else they would remove the site. Today, I am found only under Marvin R. McKim. Currently, I have over 4,800 Facebook friends that I have befriended around the world, whereas I interact and openly share these prayers with. There are over 1,200 additional followers who only follow my prayer postings. The majority of my Facebook friends are pastors, worship leaders, missionaries, ministry leaders, and others whom just love the Lord. I would like to claim that all my friends on Facebook are Christians. Before I would befriend each of them as a Facebook friend, I would research their Facebook site and try to confirm a witness of their Christian faith. The majority of my Facebook friends have reposted my exampled Christian prayers on their own Facebook sites. A large number of these Facebook friends around the world are involved in Christian ministries of their own. I would venture to say hundreds of thousands of Christians around the world have read or heard my exampled prayers that I've shared over these past 9 years. My entire Facebook friend site is meant to share exampled Christian prayers, and the site does follow all of Facebook rules, being a social network. There are no products sold or anything advertised. Several years ago, I authored these exampled prayers and organized them into a book. This book is published and available in paperback, hardback, or as an ebook. My desire is to encourage people to speak their own words in prayer. My words, inspired by the Holy Spirit, are meant to be an example in order to call to mind a person's own needs and to share praise. I have recorded over 7.5 hours of these exampled prayers into an audio-video format, placing them onto YouTube. These 110 Christian prayers on YouTube can be found under my name of Marvin R. McKim. They may be freely viewed and listened to by anyone on the internet. Over the years, I have personally met cult author Dr. Walter H. Martin, early radio evangelist Rex Humbard, evangelist Marilyn Hickey, evangelist Arthur Blessed, both TBN's Paul and Matt Crouch, CBN's Pat Robertson, and teacher Andrew Womack. We all have looked up to each of these men and women, thinking they have a greater confidence than any of us have. Each of us, as followers of Jesus Christ, as long as we come before God with reverence and humility, is heard by Him the same as any Christian leader or those whom we witness on a stage or any television screen. God only asks that what we say with our mouths should come from what we believe in our hearts.